I hid behind a pillar, tea in hand, at my sister's wedding. Everyone acted like I wasn't family. Then a stranger came and whispered, "Just follow me and act like my date." When he stood up, all eyes turned. My sister froze mid-smile. You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball, a moment so utterly humiliating, so deeply unfair, that it changes everything. What if the person who made you feel completely invisible at your own sister's wedding accidentally handed you the keys to your greatest triumph? This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about finally being seen. Let me take you back, way back, 3 months before that wedding. I was in Denver then, living in this small, cozy apartment that always smelled of vanilla and cinnamon, my little bakery sanctuary. I'd been up since 4 that morning, perfecting honey lavender croissants, and by 2 in the afternoon, when I finally stumbled home, I almost missed it, an elegant, cream-colored envelope tucked between the bills. It was Victoria's wedding invitation. My older sister. The golden child. The daughter who could do no wrong in our mother's eyes. It was exactly what you'd expect from her. Formal, traditional, embossed lettering announcing her union to someone named Gregory, a man whose name I'd never once heard her breathe. And you know what? I should have been happy for her. Sisters are supposed to share those big life moments. But as I held that stiff card, all I could think about was Thanksgiving 6 months prior. Mom's house, of course. I'd spent 2 full days perfecting a pumpkin cheesecake, a beautiful, layered thing with spiced cream cheese and a ginger snap crust. Victoria? She'd brought a store-bought pie. Elizabeth, Mom had said, barely glancing at my dessert before pushing it to the far corner of the buffet, "You really shouldn't have gone to so much trouble." Then, a beaming smile for Victoria. Victoria's pie looks lovely, so classic and traditional. That was our dynamic. Always. Victoria could show up empty-handed and be lauded for her mere presence. I could bring the moon on a silver platter, and it would somehow be too much, too flashy, trying too hard. Tucked into the invitation was a handwritten note from Victoria, her perfect cursive. "Elizabeth, I know we haven't been as close lately, but it would mean everything to have you there. You're my only sister." I called her that evening. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. "Victoria, I got your invitation. Congratulations." "Oh, good. I was worried it might get lost. Can you make it?" "Of course, I wouldn't miss it. Tell me about Gregory. How did you two meet?" There was a pause, just long enough to make me wonder. "At a pharmaceutical conference. He's a regional director at Bennett Health Solutions. Very successful, very established. Mother absolutely adores him." Of course, she did. I actually wondered if Victoria loved him, or if she just loved how he looked on paper. "I'm really happy for you," I said, forcing myself to mean it. "Thank you. Listen, I have to run. We're meeting with the wedding planner in 20 minutes. I'll send you more details later." She hung up before I could even say goodbye. I stared at my phone at the abrupt end to our conversation and felt that familiar ache settle in my chest. It wasn't quite sadness, not quite anger. Just the dull throb of being perpetually, painfully secondary. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur. I bought a new dress, a soft blue that wouldn't draw attention. I wrangled time off from the bakery, even though June was our busiest month. I probably should have seen the writing on the wall when Victoria didn't ask me to be a bridesmaid. 5 bridesmaids I learned from her social media posts, college friends, work friends, even our cousin Jessica, who she hadn't spoken to in years. But not me. "The wedding party is already set," she'd explained dismissively. That was it. That was when I finally understood. My entire childhood, all those shared memories? They meant nothing compared to her current social standing. I'd never be part of her inner circle. The wedding was at an upscale resort outside Denver. I drove there alone, my new dress carefully hung in the back seat, a small, silver-wrapped gift on the passenger seat. Weeks I'd spent, agonizing over what to give them. I finally settled on a set of handcrafted ceramic bowls from a local artist. Something thoughtful. Something that showed I cared. The resort was immaculate. Manicured lawns, mountain views, a ceremony site overlooking a pristine lake. White chairs in perfect rows, flowers everywhere. Victoria had spared no expense, which, of course, meant our mother had spared no expense. This was her dream wedding, the perfect culmination of her perfect daughter's perfect life. I arrived 2 hours early, hoping to find Victoria, to offer help, support, anything. Instead, I found chaos. The bridal suite was full of laughing women in matching robes, champagne glasses in hand, a photographer snapping every moment. I knocked softly. Victoria glanced up from her makeup chair, our eyes meeting for just a second before she looked away. "Elizabeth, you're here early. I thought maybe I could help with something. Everything's under control. The wedding planner has it handled. Why don't you go find your seat? The ceremony starts soon." One of the bridesmaids, a blonde I didn't recognize, giggled and whispered something. They both looked at me with those polite, forced smiles that screamed, "Please, just leave." My face burned. I backed out of the room. I shouldn't have come early. I shouldn't have assumed I'd be welcome in that inner sanctum. Out at the ceremony site, staff were still making last-minute adjustments. I wandered to the guest seating area, looking for my name card. Row after row of pristine chairs. The front rows were clearly marked for immediate family VIPs. I expected to be in the second or third row. Close enough to show I mattered, far enough to acknowledge I wasn't part of her daily life. Then I saw it. My name card. In the very last row. Partially hidden behind a decorative pillar supporting the ceremony arbor. From that seat, I'd have a completely blocked view. I wouldn't see her face as she said her vows. I stood there, holding that elegant little card with my name, and something inside me just cracked. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. This was Victoria putting me exactly where she thought I belonged, out of sight, out of mind, barely acknowledged. I could have left. I could have driven straight back to Denver, called in sick, and spent the day nursing my wounded pride with ice cream and bad TV. But a stubbornness I didn't know I had kept my feet planted. I was her sister. I'd been invited. And I'd be damned if I gave her the satisfaction of my absence. Guests started arriving around 4. I watched from my pillar-obscured corner. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. None of them noticed me. Mom arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony, resplendent in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was escorted to the front row, beaming, accepting congratulations. She didn't look back. Didn't scan the crowd for her younger daughter. Why would she? I was exactly where I was supposed to be, invisible. The ceremony began at 5 exactly. Music swelled. The wedding party processed. Everyone looked beautiful, perfect, like something from a magazine. Then Victoria appeared on Dad's arm. Even from my obstructed view, she was stunning. Lace, silk, a veil trailing like a cloud. Our father, who I'd barely spoken to since the divorce 5 years ago, looked proud. I craned my neck, desperate for a better view. The angle was terrible. I could see maybe 40% of the ceremony, mostly just the backs of heads. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone. 2 chairs away, partially hidden by the same pillar, sat a man. Younger than most guests, maybe early 30s. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Dark hair. Sharp features. But it was his expression that struck me. He looked as out of place, as uncomfortable as I felt. He caught me looking and offered a small, sympathetic smile. I managed a weak smile back, then returned my attention to the ceremony. The officiant spoke of love. Commitment. Victoria and Gregory exchanged vows I couldn't quite hear. Rings. A kiss. Enthusiastic applause. Just like that, my sister was married. 25 minutes, that's all it took. It felt both longer and shorter. As guests began to move towards cocktail hour, the stranger from my row approached me. Up close, he was even more striking, with intelligent gray eyes that seemed to see more than they should. That was quite a view, wasn't it? He said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Spectacular, I replied, dryly. I especially enjoyed the back of that gentleman's head in row 8. Very photogenic. He laughed. A genuine, rich sound that made something in my chest loosen slightly. I'm Julian. And I'm guessing, from your prime seating assignment, that you're either someone's least favorite relative, or you insulted the wedding planner. Elizabeth. And I'm the bride's sister, actually. His eyebrows shot up. Her sister? And they put you back here. Apparently, I'm not part of the wedding aesthetic. Julian studied me for a moment. I had the distinct impression he was seeing far more than my bitter humor. Well, that's their loss. The cocktail hour is about to start, and I have a feeling it's going to be just as awkward as the ceremony. What do you say we face it together? You don't have to pity me. I'm fine. It's not pity. It's strategic alliance. I'm here as a +1 for a business associate who couldn't make it. Which means I know exactly 3 people at this wedding, and 2 of them are the couple who just got married and won't remember I exist. So really, you'd be doing me a favor. There was something so genuine in his offer, something that made me want to say yes despite my wounded pride. Before I could respond, he extended his arm in this old-fashioned gesture. Shall we? I hesitated only a moment before linking my arm through his. Together, we walked towards the cocktail hour, and for the first time since arriving at that wedding, I didn't feel completely alone. The cocktail hour was in a spacious pavilion overlooking the lake. Flowers, candles, a bar, servers with beautiful appetizers. As a pastry chef, I have strong feelings about food as art, and whoever catered this event knew their craft. Julian stayed close as we navigated the crowd, a quiet, reassuring presence. People definitely looked at us. Who is this handsome man attached to the bride's invisible sister? We found a quiet table. Julian returned with 2 glasses of wine and a plate of appetizers he'd somehow convinced a server to compile. So, he said, settling across from me, tell me about your sister. What's she like when she's not starring in the wedding of the century? I took a sip of wine. The truth felt too raw, too revealing. But something about Julian's steady gaze made me want to be honest. Victoria is perfect. Or at least, she's always worked very hard to appear perfect. Good grades, good career, good relationships. She's the daughter every parent dreams of having. And you're not. I'm the daughter who became a pastry chef instead of a doctor or lawyer. Who lives in a small apartment instead of a house with a mortgage. Who dates occasionally instead of landing a pharmaceutical director with excellent prospects. I'm the disappointment. The one who didn't follow the script. Julian selected a crab cake. Not everyone can master that craft. Try telling my mother that. She still introduces me as Elizabeth, who works with food. Like I'm flipping burgers at a fast food chain. Family dynamics can be complicated. That's a diplomatic way of saying my family is dysfunctional. I grabbed a stuffed mushroom, suddenly ravenous. I'd been too nervous to eat earlier. What about you? What do you do that landed you an invitation to this event? I work in renewable energy consulting. My company helps businesses transition to sustainable practices. Boring, technical stuff that makes people's eyes glaze over at parties. That doesn't sound boring at all. It sounds important. Thanks. Most people just want to know if I can get them a deal on solar panels. He smiled, but there was something guarded in his expression. I was supposed to be here with my colleague, Dominic. He's the one who actually knows the groom through some business connection. But he came down with pneumonia last week, and I got volunteered to represent our company. So, we're both wedding crashers in our own way. Survivors of inadequate seating arrangements, at least. We talked through the cocktail hour. I found myself relaxing, truly relaxing, for the first time all day. Julian was easy to talk to, asking questions that showed genuine interest. He wanted to know about my favorite desserts, the challenges of a professional kitchen, why I chose pastry. I asked him about his work, the satisfaction of helping companies reduce their environmental impact, the frustrations of clients who wanted change but weren't willing to do the hard work. He spoke passionately about renewable energy, about future generations, and I found myself captivated by his enthusiasm. You really believe in what you do, I observed. Is that so surprising? Most people at my sister's wedding seem more interested in appearing successful than actually being passionate about anything. Julian's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. You notice a lot for someone who is sitting behind a pillar. When you're invisible, you learn to watch people. It's amazing what you see when no one knows you're looking. A server announced dinner. Julian stood, offering his hand. Ready to see if your seating assignment for dinner is any better? It wasn't. The reception hall was gorgeous, millions of dollars worth of flowers and lighting. Long tables. My name was at a table in the far corner, positioned so I'd have to crane my neck to see the head table. The chairs around me were empty, suggesting I'd been placed with the overflow. The had to be invited but didn't quite fit anywhere else guests. Julian appeared at my elbow, his own place card in hand. Interesting. I'm at the opposite end of the room. Almost like someone wanted to make sure the unimportant guests were spread out so we wouldn't cluster and make the seating chart look unbalanced. This is ridiculous, I snapped, frustration finally breaking through. I'm her sister. Her only sibling. And she's treating me like some distant acquaintance she felt obligated to invite. You know what? Screw the seating chart. Julian plucked my place card from the table, then his own, and pocketed them. Come on. What are you doing? Improvising. Just follow my lead and pretend you're my date. Before I could protest, he guided me toward a much closer table, clearly designated for important guests. He pulled out a chair for me, his hand warm on my back as I sat, then settled beside me with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Julian, we can. And we did. If anyone asks, there was a mix-up, and we're fixing it ourselves. Trust me. The table filled quickly with Gregory's business associates, people from the pharmaceutical industry. They greeted Julian with familiarity, and he responded with easy confidence. A woman named Patricia, VP of Operations at Bennett Health Solutions, smiled warmly at me. And you must be Julian's girlfriend. He's been keeping you a secret. I opened my mouth to correct her, but Julian smoothly interjected. Elizabeth prefers to stay out of the spotlight. She's not one for corporate events usually, but she made an exception for this wedding. How sweet. And how do you know the bride and groom? Elizabeth is Victoria's sister, actually. Patricia's eyebrows lifted in surprise. Oh, I had no idea Victoria had a sister. She never mentioned it during any of our meetings about the wedding arrangements. Her smile faltered slightly, as if realizing how that sounded. I mean, I'm sure it just never came up in conversation. I'm sure, I replied, keeping my voice neutral, even as the comment stung. My sister had worked closely with Gregory's colleagues to plan this wedding, and she'd never once mentioned me. Dinner was served in elaborate courses. The food was exceptional, but I barely tasted it. I was too aware of Julian beside me, of the way he played his role as my date with convincing ease. His hand occasionally touched my shoulder or back, small gestures that looked casual but felt intentional. He included me in conversations, deferred to my opinions, made me feel visible in a way I hadn't felt since arriving. Between courses, Gregory's father stood to give a speech. He spoke of his son's accomplishments, of welcoming Victoria into their family. Then my mother stood. Her speech was shorter, but no less effusive. She spoke of Victoria's childhood, her determination, her grace. Mother-daughter shopping trips, cake tastings. All the precious moments they'd shared. She didn't mention me. Not a word. It was as if I'd been edited out of the family history entirely. I felt Julian's hand find mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine. I squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. Then came the best man speech, then the maid of honors. I waited. Just for someone, anyone, to acknowledge my existence in even the most minimal way. But speech after speech passed, and my name never came up. I was the ghost at the feast, present but unseen. Dessert arrived, an elaborate tiered creation of chocolate and raspberry. It looked impressive, but lacked depth of flavor. The ganache was too sweet, the cake layers too dry. As a professional, I couldn't help but critique it, and Julian noticed my expression. Not up to your standards? It's beautiful, but beauty isn't everything. The execution is off. The chocolate is masking the raspberry instead of complementing it, and the texture is too dense. Could you do better? In my sleep. The words came out more confident than I felt, but they were true. I might be the family disappointment in every other area, but in the kitchen, I knew my worth. I believe you, Julian said simply. After dessert, the dancing began. Victoria and Gregory took the floor, swirling under perfect lighting. They looked like something from a magazine. My father cut in for the father-daughter dance, and I watched them, remembering him spinning me around our living room when I was small. Before the divorce. Before everything fell apart. Did Victoria remember those times? Did she ever think about the family we used to be? Julian stood and offered his hand. Dance with me. You don't have to keep playing the attentive date. I'm fine. I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, I'm a terrible dancer, and I need someone to step on who won't sue me. I let him lead me onto the dance floor. He wasn't terrible at all. Quite good. Actually, leading with confidence, keeping a respectful distance. We swayed, and I found myself relaxing into the rhythm, into the moment. Thank you, I said quietly. For tonight. For sitting with me. For the whole fake date thing. You didn't have to do any of this. Maybe I wanted to. You're interesting, Elizabeth. More interesting than anyone else at this wedding. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're talented and underappreciated. I know you see through the superficial nonsense most people accept without question. I know you're hurt, but you're trying not to show it, and that takes strength. His words hit something deep inside me, a place I'd been protecting all evening. My eyes burned with unshed tears, and I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry at my sister's wedding. The song ended, and Julian guided us to the edge of the dance floor. I need some air, I admitted. Let's go outside. We slipped out onto a terrace. The evening air was cool and welcome. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, creating a magical atmosphere that felt at odds with the turmoil inside me. I shouldn't have come, I said, leaning against the railing. I knew it would be like this, but some part of me hoped it would be different. That maybe Victoria would remember we're sisters. That maybe she'd want me here for real, not just to check a box on her obligation list. Julian stood beside me, his shoulder touching mine. Family can be the most complicated relationship we have. We're bound to them by blood, but that doesn't guarantee love or respect or even basic consideration. You sound like you're speaking from experience. My father and I haven't spoken in 3 years. He had very specific plans for my life. And when I chose a different path, he made it clear I was no longer the son he wanted. So yes, I understand what it feels like to be the disappointment. I turned to him, seeing new layers in his expression. I'm sorry. That must have been painful. It was. It is. But I learned something important from it. The people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are still people with their own limitations and prejudices and failures. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. Is that what tonight is? You choosing to be kind to a stranger. Maybe it started that way. But you're not a stranger anymore, Elizabeth. And this isn't just kindness. There was something in his voice, something that made my heart beat faster. Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened and a group of guests spilled out, laughing. The moment broke. Julian stepped back slightly. We should probably go back inside. I think they're about to cut the cake. The cake-cutting ceremony was everything I expected. Photos, speeches, perfect moments. Victoria fed Gregory a small bite with delicate precision. He returned the gesture. No smashed cake in faces. Nothing undignified. Perfect control, as always. As servers distributed slices, I saw my mother, making her way through the crowd. She was in her element, basking in Victoria's reflected glory. When her gaze finally landed on me, surprise flickered, then disapproval. She approached our table, her smile tightening. Elizabeth, I didn't expect to see you sitting here. This table was reserved for Gregory's business associates. There was a seating mix-up, Julian said smoothly before I could respond. I'm Julian, one of Gregory's renewable energy consultants. Elizabeth and I are here together. My mother's gaze swept over Julian, taking in his expensive suit and confident demeanor. I could practically see her recalculating. I see. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Julian. I'm Eleanor, Victoria's mother. She emphasized the words as if to remind me of my place. I wasn't aware Elizabeth was seeing anyone. We've been keeping things quiet, Julian replied, his hand finding mine on the table. Elizabeth is quite private about her personal life. Yes, she is. Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. Elizabeth, dear, I hope you're enjoying the wedding. Victoria worked so hard to make everything perfect. It's beautiful, I said, forcing the words out. She must be very happy. She is. Gregory is exactly the kind of man I always hoped she'd marry. Successful, established, from a good family. It's everything a mother could want for her daughter. The unspoken comparison hung in the air, unlike you, who works in a bakery and lives alone and has nothing to show for your life. Julian's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth was just telling me about her work as a pastry chef, Julian said, his voice even. It sounds incredibly demanding. Not everyone has the talent or discipline to succeed in that field. Eleanor's expression flickered with annoyance at having her implied criticism deflected. Yes, well, we all have our different paths. I should get back to the other guests. Do try to enjoy yourself, Elizabeth. She swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and maternal disappointment. That was unpleasant, Julian observed when she was out of earshot. That was my mother on a good day. You should see her when she's really trying to make a point. I'm starting to understand why you were sitting behind that pillar. The evening wore on. Victoria and Gregory made their rounds. They reached our table eventually, Gregory leading with a politician's smile. Up close, he looked handsome but lacked character. His handshake was firm, but perfunctory when Julian introduced himself. Then Victoria's eyes landed on me, and something complex passed across her face. Surprise. Definitely discomfort, perhaps. She'd probably forgotten I was even here. Elizabeth, you look lovely, she said, her voice carrying that careful politeness people use with acquaintances they don't quite remember. Thank you. The wedding is beautiful, Victoria. Congratulations. I'm so glad you could make it. And I see you've met some of Gregory's colleagues. Her gaze slid to Julian. I don't believe we've been introduced. Julian. I work with Gregory on sustainability initiatives for Bennett Health Solutions, and I have the pleasure of being Elizabeth's date this evening. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. This was clearly news to her. Oh, I didn't realize you were seeing anyone, Elizabeth. How wonderful. The way she said it, with that slight emphasis on wonderful, suggested she found it more surprising than wonderful. As if she couldn't quite believe someone like Julian would be interested in someone like me. We've been dating for a few months, Julian continued, his arm sliding around my waist in a gesture that looked natural and possessive. Elizabeth is remarkable. I count myself lucky she tolerates my workaholic tendencies. How nice, Victoria said, though her smile had frozen. Well, we should continue making our rounds. So many people to thank, but let's catch up properly soon, Elizabeth. I feel like we haven't really talked in ages. They moved on, and I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That was surreal. She seemed surprised to see you looking happy. Victoria isn't used to me having anything she might consider valuable, including a handsome date who impresses her new in-laws. So, you think I'm handsome? Julian's eyes danced with amusement. Don't let it go to your head. You're objectively attractive. It's not a personal observation. Of course not. Purely objective. Around 10, the wedding coordinator announced the bride and groom would be leaving soon. Guests were invited to line up with sparklers for the send-off. I debated skipping, but Julian convinced me. You came this far? Might as well see it through. We stood in line, sparklers distributed. Victoria and Gregory emerged, running through a corridor of light, laughing, waving, before climbing into a luxury car. As it pulled away, taillights disappearing into the night, I felt a strange sense of finality. The wedding was over. Victoria had gotten her perfect day, her perfect marriage, her perfect life. And I had stood witness to it all from my position on the margins, exactly where she wanted me. Guests began dispersing. Julian and I lingered. Can I walk you to your car? He asked. I'm actually staying at the resort tonight, room 314. I hesitated, then added, what about you? Same. Room 209. My colleague had already booked it, seemed wasteful not to use it. We walked slowly through the gardens. The night air had cooled, and I shivered in my thin dress. Julian immediately shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. A gesture so classic, so unexpected, I almost laughed. You don't have to do that. I'm fine. Humor me. I was raised with old-fashioned manners, and my mother would haunt me if I let you freeze. His jacket was warm, smelled of expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. I pulled it closer, grateful for both the warmth and the excuse to keep something of his with me a little longer. Thank you, I said, for everything tonight. You turned what could have been a miserable evening into something almost bearable. Just bearable? I'll have to work on my fake dating skills. Okay, better than bearable. Surprisingly pleasant in parts. That's more like it. He stopped walking, turning to face me. Elizabeth, I know tonight started as a strategic alliance between two wedding outcasts, but I want you to know it became more than that for me. You're genuinely interesting, funny, talented, and far too good for people who can't see your worth. His words wrapped around something fragile inside me, something I'd been protecting for too long. Julian, I know I want to see you again. After tonight. After this wedding. In the real world, where we're just two people without assigned seating charts and family drama. I wanted to say yes immediately. Every instinct told me this man was different, that this connection was real despite the unusual circumstances. But doubt crept in. The voice that sounded suspiciously like my mother, reminding me that men like Julian didn't date women like me, that this was probably just kindness, nothing more. You don't have to say that just because you felt sorry for me tonight. I'm not. I'm saying it because I spent the evening with someone I genuinely enjoyed. And I want more evenings like that. Because you make me laugh and think and feel less alone in crowded rooms. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth knowing better. He paused, vulnerability crossing his features. But if you're not interested, I understand. I don't want to push. I am interested. I admit it, the words rushing out before I could second-guess them. I just don't want to get my hopes up about something that might disappear in the morning light. Then let's make sure it doesn't disappear. Have breakfast with me tomorrow. The resort has a decent restaurant, and we can talk without tuxedos and wedding stress. What do you say? Breakfast sounds good. His smile was genuine and relieved. 9 o'clock. I'll meet you in the lobby. We'd reached the entrance. The lobby was quiet. This was the moment the evening would officially end. Julian seemed reluctant to leave, too. He stood close, his hands still holding mine, his eyes searching my face. Good night, Elizabeth. I'm glad I crashed your sister's wedding. I'm glad you did, too. Good night, Julian. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't want to. His lips met mine in a kiss that was gentle, questioning, and somehow exactly right. It lasted only a moment before he pulled back, his thumb brushing my cheek. Then he was walking away, toward the elevators, and I was standing alone in the lobby, wearing his jacket, touching my lips and wondering what exactly had just happened. I made my way to my room in a daze. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thanks for coming tonight. It meant a lot to have you there. I stared at the message. It meant a lot? Was that why she'd relegated me to the worst seat? Why she'd never mentioned having a sister? I typed and deleted several responses before settling on something non-committal. Congratulations again. The wedding was beautiful. She responded immediately. We should definitely get together when I'm back from the honeymoon. I want to hear all about your new boyfriend. He seems very successful. Of course. That's what she'd taken away from the evening. Not that I'd been there supporting her, not that we'd barely spoken, but that I'd shown up with an impressive date. That was the only thing that made me visible to her. I didn't respond. I set my phone aside and stared at the ceiling, processing the emotional whiplash of the day. I'd come to this wedding expecting to feel like an outsider, and I'd been proven right in the worst ways. But I'd also met Julian, had those hours of feeling seen and valued. And now I had breakfast to look forward to. Something had shifted tonight. Some fundamental understanding about my place in my family and my own worth. I woke around 8 the next morning. Julian was waiting in the lobby at 9 exactly, looking refreshed, in jeans and a navy sweater. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine expression that made my stomach flutter. Good morning. You look beautiful. You look pretty good yourself. Is that my line though? Aren't men supposed to be the ones getting compliments on their appearance? I believe in equal opportunity compliments. Come on. I heard they make excellent waffles here. The restaurant was busy, but we found a quiet table overlooking the lake. Over breakfast, we talked more freely than we had at the wedding. Julian told me about his work. I told him about the bakery, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and delicious. You light up when you talk about baking, Julian observed. It's obvious you love what you do. I do. It's the one area of my life where I feel completely confident. No second guessing, no wondering if I'm good enough. I know I'm good at what I do. Then why do you let your family make you feel otherwise? The question was direct, almost confrontational, but his tone remained gentle. I set down my fork. Because they're my family. Because some part of me still wants their approval, even though I know I'll never get it. Not the way Victoria gets it anyway. What if you stopped wanting their approval? What if you decided your opinion of yourself mattered more than theirs? Easier said than done when you've spent your whole life being compared to someone and coming up short. Julian reached across the table, his hand covering mine. For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. And I don't say that lightly. We finished breakfast and walked outside, neither of us ready to part ways. I should probably get on the road soon, I said reluctantly. I have work tomorrow. Before you go, can I ask you something? Julian's expression turned serious. Last night, watching how your family treated you, seeing how they've made you feel small and unimportant, it made me angry. Not just sympathetic, but genuinely angry on your behalf. That's kind of you. But I'm not finished. What if there was a way to change the narrative? To make them see you differently? To give you back some of the power they've been taking from you all these years? I studied his face, trying to understand where this was going. What do you mean? I mean, what if we continued this? Not fake dating, but real dating. What if we spent time together, built something genuine, and along the way, showed your family that you're not the disappointment they've painted you as? Julian, I'm not going to use you to make my family jealous. That's not fair to you. You wouldn't be using me. I'm offering because I want to see you again regardless. But I also want to help you if I can. Think about it. Your sister just married a pharmaceutical executive, right? Well, I happen to be someone her new husband's company needs. Someone who could make things very interesting for them. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the morning air. What are you saying exactly? Julian's expression shifted, becoming more calculating than I'd seen before. I'm saying that Gregory's company, Bennett Health Solutions, has been in talks with my firm about a major sustainability overhaul. It's a multi-million-dollar project that would significantly improve their environmental impact and their public image. I'm one of the lead consultants on the proposal. And you'd use that as leverage somehow? Not leverage exactly. Just an opportunity to remind them that people they overlook might be more important than they realize. Your family, especially Victoria, seems very invested in status and success. What if you suddenly had access to that world through me? What if they had to see you differently? I should have said no. I should have thanked him and explained that revenge wasn't my style, that I was above such pettiness. But standing there in the morning light, remembering every slight and dismissal from the night before, something darker whispered that maybe I deserved a little vindication. This feels manipulative, I said slowly. Is it more manipulative than seating you behind a pillar at your own sister's wedding? Than never mentioning you have a sister to colleagues she worked with on planning? Than your mother pretending you don't exist in her speeches? Julian's voice was passionate now. Sometimes, the people who hurt us need to be shown consequences. Not cruelty. Just consequences. What would this actually look like? I'm not going to sabotage anyone's business or career. I'm not that person. Nothing like that. I'm talking about visibility. About making sure you're present and acknowledged at future family events. About your sister and mother realizing that dismissing you means potentially damaging relationships that matter to Gregory's career. About you finally getting the respect you deserve, even if it starts from a place of obligation rather than genuine affection. It was twisted logic, and I knew it. But it was also seductive. How many years had I spent being invisible? How many family gatherings had I endured being treated as lesser? The thought of Victoria being forced to acknowledge me, to include me, to treat me like I mattered, it was intoxicating. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course, take all the time you need. But, Elizabeth, whether you agree to any of this or not, I meant what I said about wanting to see you again. That part is real. No manipulation involved. We exchanged phone numbers before parting. Julian kissed me goodbye, another gentle kiss that made my heart race. And then I was driving back to Denver, my thoughts in a complete turmoil. The next week passed in a blur. Julian texted me daily, casual messages that gradually built into longer conversations. We talked about everything and nothing. He never pushed about his proposition, never brought up Victoria or revenge. He just talked to me like I was someone worth knowing. On Friday, he called. I have a business dinner next Thursday in Denver. A potential client I'm trying to woo. Would you want to join me? Fair warning, it might be boring corporate talk, but I'd love your company. Are you sure? I don't know anything about renewable energy consulting. That's exactly why I want you there. You'll keep me honest. Keep the conversation from disappearing completely into jargon. Plus, the restaurant is supposed to have an incredible pastry chef. I thought you might enjoy critiquing their desserts. I laughed despite myself. You're bribing me with professional reconnaissance. Is it working? Yes. What's the dress code? Thursday arrived faster than I expected. I left work early, changing into a black dress that was elegant without being flashy. Julian picked me up at 7, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark suit. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place where menus don't list prices. Julian's client was already there, Patricia. The same Patricia from Victoria's wedding. Her eyes widened with recognition. Elizabeth. What a lovely surprise. I didn't realize you and Julian were still together. Still together and going strong, Julian said smoothly, his hand warm on my back. Elizabeth has been patient with my crazy work schedule. We sat, and I tried to fade into the background as Julian and Patricia discussed the sustainability project. But Patricia kept pulling me into the conversation, asking about my work, expressing genuine interest in the bakery. That sounds fascinating. I have such respect for people who work with their hands, who create tangible things. My job is all spreadsheets and conference calls. Sometimes I miss making something real. The dinner progressed pleasantly. When dessert arrived, a deconstructed lemon tart with lavender cream, I couldn't help offering my professional opinion. The components are technically excellent, but they're fighting each other rather than creating harmony. The lavender is too strong, overwhelming the lemon instead of complementing it. Patricia leaned forward with interest. Could you fix it? If you were making this, what would you change? I found myself explaining the balance of flavors, the importance of letting each element shine. Julian watched me with something like pride, and Patricia listened intently. You know, Patricia said as coffee was served, we're planning a major corporate event in August, a celebration for the successful completion of our sustainability project. Assuming Julian's team delivers everything they've promised, of course. She smiled at him. We haven't settled on a caterer yet. Would your bakery be interested in handling the desserts? I blinked, caught off guard. We're a small operation. I'm not sure we'd have the capacity for a large corporate event. Let me rephrase. Would you personally be interested in creating desserts for the event? We could work around your schedule, and I'm authorized to offer very competitive compensation. Julian squeezed my hand under the table. Elizabeth's work is exceptional. You'd be lucky to have her. I'd need to talk to my boss. Make sure it wouldn't conflict with bakery commitments, but yes, I'd be interested in discussing it further. Patricia smiled warmly. Excellent. I'll have my assistant reach out to you next week. And Julian, excellent choice in girlfriend. She's delightful. After dinner, Julian drove me home. I was quiet, processing. At my apartment building, he parked and turned to face me. That was quite an evening. Did you plan that? The dessert conversation? Patricia offering me that job. I didn't plan anything. I told Patricia we were having dinner, and I mentioned you were a pastry chef. The rest was all her genuine interest, and your talent speaking for itself. But you knew she might offer me something. I hoped she might see what I see. That you're incredibly skilled at what you do and deserve opportunities to showcase that talent. Is that so wrong? I studied his face in the dim light. I can't tell if you're genuinely trying to help me, or if this is all part of some elaborate revenge plot. Can't it be both? I care about you, Elizabeth. That's real. But I also think the people who've dismissed you need a reality check. Through them having to acknowledge your talent and value because it affects things they care about. This is complicated. The best things usually are. He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. For what it's worth, I'm falling for you. That complicates things too. But I'm not sorry about it. My breath caught. Julian, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Now, go inside before I do something impulsive, like kiss you senseless in front of your building. I got out, but leaned back through the window. I'm falling for you too. Just so you know. His smile could have lit up the entire city. Good. That makes what comes next easier. What comes next? Patience. You'll see. The following week, Patricia's assistant called. The corporate event would be in mid-August, celebrating Bennett Health Solutions' transition to sustainable practices. They wanted an elaborate dessert spread for 200 guests, and they were offering 3 times my usual rate. My boss was thrilled. We worked out an arrangement where I'd use the bakery kitchen during off hours. The bakery would get credited, and I'd receive the bulk of the payment. Julian and I fell into a pattern over the next few weeks. Dinners, movies, long conversations that stretched late into the night. He was easy to be with, making me laugh, challenging me to think differently. The physical attraction was undeniable, but what surprised me was how much I enjoyed simply being around him. We didn't talk much about Victoria or my family during those weeks. It was like we created a bubble where that drama didn't exist, where I could just be myself without the weight of family expectations. Then, 6 weeks after the wedding, Victoria called. Elizabeth. Hi. Sorry I haven't been in touch since the honeymoon. Things have been crazy with settling into married life. No worries. How was the trip? Incredible. The Maldives were everything we hoped for. Listen, I wanted to see if you were free for lunch this Saturday. I feel like we haven't really talked in forever, and I want to catch up properly. I almost said no out of habit. But then I thought about Julian's words. Visibility. Respect. Sure, I can do lunch. Where did you have in mind? We met at an upscale bistro near her new house. She looked tanned and relaxed, the picture of newlywed bliss. We ordered salads, made small talk. So, she said finally, tell me about Julian. You two seemed quite close at the wedding, but you never mentioned you were seeing anyone. It's relatively new. We met a few months ago. He seems very successful. Gregory's colleagues were all impressed by him. Apparently, his company is handling a massive project for Bennett Health. There it was. The real reason for this lunch. Not sisterly bonding, but fishing for information about someone who mattered to her husband's career. Julian's very good at what he does, I said neutrally. I'm just surprised you never mentioned him before. I mean, I told you all about Gregory when we started dating. Had she though? I remembered stilted phone calls, few details. But pointing that out would only create conflict, and I was curious to see where this was heading. I tend to keep my personal life private. Well, I'm glad you're happy. And I heard you're doing the desserts for the Bennett Health event in August. That's wonderful. Gregory mentioned Patricia was very impressed with you. It's a good opportunity. Victoria stirred her salad absently. Listen, I wanted to apologize if things felt weird at the wedding. I know the seating arrangement wasn't ideal, and I feel bad that we didn't get much time to talk. The seating arrangement. She actually had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was the wedding planner's mistake. She didn't understand family dynamics, and by the time I saw the setup, it was too late to change things without causing chaos. You could have mentioned having a sister. To Gregory's colleagues. To anyone. But you didn't. That's not fair. Of course, people know I have a sister. Patricia didn't. She was surprised at the wedding when Julian mentioned it. She said you'd never brought it up during all your planning meetings. Victoria's face flushed. I don't talk about my personal life at work. That doesn't mean I'm hiding you, does it though? When was the last time you invited me to anything? When did you last call just to talk? Not because you needed something or had an obligation. Elizabeth, you're being dramatic. We are sisters. Of course, we have a relationship. Do we? Because from where I'm sitting, we have a biological connection and not much else. You treat me like an afterthought. Like someone you have to include out of duty, but would rather forget. Victoria set down her fork, her composure cracking slightly. Is that really what you think? That I don't care about you? I think you care about me the way you care about distant cousins. Present at major events, but not really part of your life. And honestly, I've accepted that. What bothers me is the pretense. Don't invite me to lunch and act like we're close when we both know we're not. Fine. You want honesty? I'll give you honesty. You made choices that embarrassed our mother. You chose a career path that she couldn't brag about to her friends. You refused to conform to the expectations we grew up with. And yes, that created distance between us. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's the truth. Her words confirmed what I'd always suspected, but never heard spoken aloud. I wasn't the disappointment because I'd failed. I was the disappointment because I'd refused to compete on their terms. Thank you for finally being honest, I said quietly. But here's some honesty back. I'm not embarrassed by my choices. I love what I do, and I'm good at it. If that's not enough for you or Mom, that's your problem, not mine. And I'm done apologizing for being myself. I stood, placing enough cash on the table to cover my meal. Thanks for lunch, Victoria. And congratulations again on your marriage. I hope it brings you everything you're looking for. I left before she could respond, my hands shaking as I walked to my car. The conversation had been brutal, but necessary. Something inside me had shifted. Some fundamental refusal to keep accepting crumbs of affection from people who saw me as lesser. Julian called that evening. I told him about the lunch, about Victoria's admission, about how I'd finally stood up for myself. I'm proud of you, he said. That took courage. It felt good. Terrifying, but good. Like I finally said things that needed saying. Are you ready for the next step? Not just as the pastry chef. I want you visible and acknowledged and impossible to dismiss. Are you ready for that? I thought about Victoria's face during our lunch, about my mother's dismissive comments at the wedding, about all the years of being treated as less than. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The 3 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. I worked obsessively on the dessert menu, creating elegant individual portions that would be both beautiful and delicious. Chocolate raspberry tarts with gold leaf. Lemon panna cotta with edible flowers. Miniature opera cakes. Honey lavender macarons that melted on the tongue. Each piece was a work of art. Proof of my skill and dedication. Julian helped where he could, taste testing, offering honest feedback. Our relationship had deepened, moving from the exciting uncertainty of new romance into something more solid. I was in love with him. Though I hadn't said the words aloud, I suspected he felt the same. The night of the event arrived. It was being held at an elegant space downtown, all glass walls and modern architecture. I'd spent the afternoon setting up the dessert display, arranging each piece with strategic lighting. I'd changed into a stunning emerald dress Julian had insisted on buying me, telling me I needed to look as impressive as my desserts. My hair was styled, my makeup flawless. When Julian saw me, his expression made the effort worthwhile. You're breathtaking, he said simply. You clean up pretty well yourself. The event was already in full swing when we made our entrance. 200 guests, pharmaceutical executives, city officials, business leaders. I spotted Gregory and Victoria across the room, deep in conversation with a group of colleagues. My mother was there, too, looking elegant in champagne silk. Patricia spotted us immediately and rushed over. Elizabeth, the desserts are stunning. Everyone is already talking about them. You've outdone yourself. Thank you. I'm glad they meet expectations. Meet them? You've exceeded them by miles. Come, I want to introduce you to some people. The next hour was surreal. Patricia pulled me from group to group, introducing me as the talented pastry chef responsible for the incredible desserts. People complimented my work, asked about my training, requested business cards. I was visible in a way I'd never been at family events, acknowledged for my actual skills rather than dismissed for my choices. Julian stayed close, his presence both supportive and strategic. He made sure to mention our relationship to everyone we spoke with, positioning me not just as the chef, but as his partner. In this world that valued connections and status, being Julian's girlfriend carried weight. I watched Victoria notice us from across the room. Saw her expression shift, confusion, recognition, then something that looked like discomfort. She said something too. Gregory, and they both looked our way. They've spotted us, Julian murmured in my ear. Ready for what? To remind them you exist. Before I could respond, Gregory approached, Victoria beside him. He looked strained, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Julian, Elizabeth, good to see you both. Elizabeth, I've heard nothing but praise for your desserts. Very impressive work. Thank you. I'm pleased they've been well received. Victoria stood slightly behind Gregory, her expression carefully neutral. Hi, Elizabeth. Everything looks beautiful. Thank you, Victoria. An awkward silence. Finally, Gregory broke it. Julian, I was hoping we could discuss the final phase of the sustainability project. There are some budget considerations we need to address. Of course. Elizabeth, would you excuse me for a few minutes? I nodded, and the two men moved away, leaving me alone with Victoria. The moment felt heavy with unspoken words. You've been busy, Victoria said finally. Landing major catering jobs, dating important consultants. Quite a change from the last time we talked. I've always been busy. You just never noticed. That's not fair, is it? You spent years dismissing what I do as insignificant. Now that it's benefiting, Victoria's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. What do you want from me, Elizabeth? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate your career choices. I'm sorry the wedding seating was bad. I'm sorry we're not closer. Is that what you need to hear? I don't need anything from you anymore. That's what you don't understand. I'm not the little sister begging for scraps of approval. I've built a life I'm proud of, with people who value me for who I actually am. People like Julian, you mean? Gregory says he's very influential in his field. Very useful to know. The implication stung. Even though I'd expected it. You think I'm using him, or that he's using me? That's the only way you can understand this, isn't it? As a transaction. I'm just saying it's convenient. You show up at my wedding alone and invisible. And now suddenly you're dating someone Gregory's company depends on, and getting hired for major events. It's quite a transformation. Before I could respond, Julian returned with Gregory. Both men looked tense. Victoria, we should mingle with the other guests, Gregory said, his tone brooking no argument. There are several board members here we need to speak with. Victoria shot me one last unreadable look before allowing Gregory to guide her away. I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That looked intense, Julian observed. Are you okay? She thinks I'm using you to gain status, or that you're using me to influence Gregory's business decisions. She can't conceive of us just genuinely caring about each other. Does her opinion matter to you? I thought about it honestly. Not as much as it would have a few months ago. I'm done needing her approval. Good. Because you're about to get something better than approval. What do you mean? Julian smiled. That calculating expression I'd seen before. Watch. Patricia approached the microphone setup near the dessert display. The room quieted. She spoke about the successful sustainability project, thanking Julian's team for their excellent work. Then she pivoted. I also want to recognize someone who made tonight extra special. Elizabeth, could you join me up here? My heart hammered as I made my way to the front. Patricia smiled warmly and continued. Elizabeth created every single dessert you've enjoyed tonight. Her artistry and skill transformed our celebration into something truly memorable. But more than that, she represents exactly the kind of innovation and dedication we're trying to foster at Bennett Health Solutions. Which is why I'm pleased to announce that we'll be partnering with her for all of our major events going forward. Elizabeth, thank you for your incredible work. The room erupted in applause. I stood there, stunned, as Patricia handed me an envelope containing the contract. My eyes found Julian in the crowd, saw his proud smile, and understood that he'd orchestrated this moment perfectly. Then I found Victoria. She stood next to Gregory, clapping along with everyone else. But her expression was complex. Surprise, certainly, discomfort, maybe even a hint of respect she'd never shown before. Our mother stood beside them, looking equally shocked. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention in a room that included my family. And it was because of my own merit, my own skills, my own worth. Not because I'd married well or achieved conventional success, but because I'd excelled at something I loved. The applause faded, and I returned to Julian's side. He pulled me close, kissing my temple. How does it feel? Like vindication, I whispered. Like finally being seen. You were always worth seeing. They were just too blind to notice. The evening continued, but everything had shifted. People sought me out now, not as Julian's girlfriend or Victoria's sister, but as Elizabeth, the talented pastry chef with a bright future. My mother approached eventually, her smile tight but present. Congratulations, dear. That was quite an announcement. Thank you, Mother. I suppose your career choice has worked out after all. It wasn't an apology. Wasn't an acknowledgement of years of dismissal. But it was something. A grudging recognition that perhaps I'd known what I was doing all along. In the months that followed, everything changed. The Bennett Health Partnership led to other opportunities, other high-profile events. Julian and I moved in together, our relationship deepening into something permanent and real. We talked about the future, about marriage and children, building a life that honored both our ambitions. Victoria and I reached a cautious détente. We weren't close. Probably never would be. But there was mutual respect now. She'd learned that dismissing me came with consequences. That I had value beyond her narrow definition of success. Our interactions remained formal, but cordial. Family gatherings were no longer the painful exercises in invisibility they'd once been. My mother struggled more with the adjustment. She'd built her identity around Victoria's achievements, and having to acknowledge mine upset her carefully maintained hierarchy. But even she couldn't ignore the reality of my success, the respect I'd earned in my field, the life I'd built on my own terms. As for Victoria and Gregory, the consequences of her husband's company relying on Julian's for sustainability consulting meant that Victoria could never fully dismiss me without potentially damaging Gregory's professional relationships. She'd backed herself into a corner of forced civility, having to include me, acknowledge my presence, because doing otherwise might reflect poorly on Gregory. The pharmaceutical industry was smaller than people realized, and word traveled fast about how executives' families conducted themselves. Victoria, who had always been so careful about maintaining the perfect image, now had to ensure that image included being a supportive sister. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd spent years making me invisible. And now she was trapped in a situation where she had to make me visible. Had to sing my praises to her husband's colleagues. Had to pretend we'd always been close. Every family gathering became a performance where she couldn't afford to slip. Couldn't afford to show the disdain she'd once displayed so freely. Her perfect life now required my presence, and that requirement would follow her for as long as Gregory's career depended on maintaining good relationships with Julian's firm. She'd constructed her own cage, one where she'd forever be reminded that the sister she'd dismissed had become someone she couldn't afford to ignore. Looking back on that wedding day, on sitting behind that pillar, feeling invisible and worthless, I can hardly recognize the person I'd been. Julian had offered me more than fake dating protection at a difficult event. He'd offered me a mirror that reflected my true worth, a partnership that elevated rather than diminished, and the tools to demand the respect I'd always deserved. The revenge, if that's what it was, hadn't been about cruelty or destruction. It had been about finally, definitively proving that I mattered. Not because of who I married or how I compared to my sister, but because of who I was and what I could do. And as I stand now, in the kitchen of the bakery I co-own, creating art from flour and sugar and skill, I realized the best revenge was becoming exactly who I was meant to be. And making them all watch while I did it. So, tell me, have you ever had a moment where you just absolutely had to reclaim your power? What did you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know.